All right, so this video is taking solving equations with variables on both sides to a little different level. So here we have 2x plus 4 equals a negative outside the parentheses, and then, so that's multiplication. So it's times negative 7x plus 6. Well, first of all, we know that a number right next to parentheses, or technically parentheses in general, just mean multiplication. Now, since there's no number outside the variable with the negative, we envision a 1. It's just like when there's no number in front of the variable, we consider it a 1. So just like when there's no number in front of the parentheses, we consider it a 1. But there's a negative sign, so it's a negative 1. Negative 1 times negative 7 is a positive 7. And a negative 1 times a positive 6 is a negative 6. And then that whole thing equals 2x plus 4. Then I just solve it like I normally would. I'm going to go ahead and subtract 2x from both sides. Subtract 2x from both sides. That's going to give me 5x there. And then since I had 0 here, I'm going to get a 0 on this side. Plus 6 is 0. Plus 6 over here. That gives me 10. That gives me 10 equals 5x. 10 divided by 5, x equals 2. And sure enough, it's 5 times 2 that equals 10. So that's not really different, okay? You're going to have a mixture of equations today, and some are just going to have a regular solution, just like we've done before, that are going to be just like this. Now, we're going to take this to a different place with these two examples. 3 minus 4x equals negative 7 minus 4x. Now, so we're just going to go ahead and solve these like we normally would. I'm going to go ahead, since this is a negative 4x, I'm going to add 4x to both sides, and that's going to give me 0. And then I'm going to add 4x over here, and that's going to give me 0. Well, that's interesting, because now that gives me 3 equals negative 7. And there's no x here because I added 4 and got 0, added 4 to negative 4 and got 0. Just leaves me with 3 equals negative 7. Well, we know that 3 does not equal negative 7. That just simply is not true. So in this situation, it is what we call no solution. Sometimes an equation does not have a solution. There's no value for x that can actually make it work. So let's try this one. 1/2 being multiplied by 10x plus 7 equals 5x. Well, if I do 1/2 times 10, all right, remember what I can think. 1/2 times 10 over 1. That's going to give me 10 over 2. 1 times 10 is 10. 2 times 1 is 2. You can also just plug in 1/2 times 10 into your calculator. 10 divided by 2 is 5. So that's going to leave me with 5x plus 1/2 times 7. So I come down over here, 1/2 times 7 over 1. And 1 times 7 is 7. 2 times 1 is 2. I get 7 over 2. Okay, which if I want to, 2 can go into 7 3 times. There's 1 left over. So this could become 3.5 if I wanted it to. I could just leave it as 7 over 2. So 1/2 times 10x is 5x. 1/2 times a positive 7 is a plus 3.5. And that whole thing equals 5x. Well, that's interesting. So I'm going to subtract 5x from both sides. Give me 0. Subtract 5x from both sides. That's going to give me 0 there. Okay, and so now I'm left with 3.5 equals 0 because there's nothing left over here. And once again, we know that 3.5 does not equal 0, which means that once again, this equation is a no solution. You will have some equations today that simply have no solution, which means there's really no value for x that can make the equation work. All right, so let's move on to the last part here. And we're going to take it to an even different place. 3 times 4x minus 1 equals 12x minus 3. Well, so first thing I want to do is clear the parentheses. Remember, this is multiplication. 3 times 4x is 12x. 3 times a negative 1 is a negative 3. Okay, and so I get 3 times 4x is 12x. 3 times negative 1 is negative 3. And then that whole thing is going to equal 12x minus 3. Well, that's interesting because I have the same exact expression on each side. 12x minus 3 equals 12x minus 3. So they're the exact same thing. Well, so that's when I have that situation, that is what I call infinite solutions. So it's just the opposite of no solution. Where there's no solution that we had previously, where there's no number that we can plug in for x to make the equation true. Here, it doesn't matter what value I put in for x, it will be true. Okay, infinite solutions does not matter what the solution is, the equation is true. X can equal anything. So, let's move to this one. 2 times 2 minus 3x in parentheses equals 4 times 1 minus 3 over 2x in parentheses. Well, first of all, I do 2 times 2, which is 4. 2 times a negative 3x is a negative 6x. That equals then 4 times 1, which is 4. Then 4 times a negative 3 over 2. 4 times 3 over 2. And of course, I know this is negative. I want to remember that. So it's going to be 4 over 1. 4 times 3 is 12. 1 times 2 is 2. And 12 divided by 2 is 6. And of course, I want to remember that it's a negative 3 over 2, which means my answer is a negative 6. So I end up with 4 minus 6x. Well, here we have that situation again. 4 minus 6x equals 4 minus 6x. We have the same exact thing, which means once again, we have infinite solutions. It doesn't matter what value I plug in for x, it will be a solution. All right, thanks. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hopefully it's helpful. Bye.